Beginning of my notes, it says James part 4. As I promised, we were going to be in the book of James. Title of the message is Prosperity and Patience in Prayer. We're going to start off at Proverbs chapter 3, verses 5 and 6. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and do not rely on your own understanding. In all your ways know him, and he will make your paths straight. Amen. Patience in prayer. Having patience is a life skill we don't seem to be passing on to the next generation. If we want to watch a movie, there's Netflix, Hulu, HBO Max, Disney Plus, Amazon Prime Video, etc., etc. And if you can't find it streaming because it's not out yet, you can usually rent it online. They even have the option of renting movies that are still in the movie theater. That thing kind of shocked me until I looked at the price of it. Then I understand why they're doing it. They're making their money just fine. When I was a child, there was a few movies we were allowed to watch. Not very many. Don't forget, I grew up Assemblies of God, and we were blessed to even have a TV in the house. I'll just put that. Having a TV at all was discouraged. But there was the news, and so it was allowed. But when we did find a movie we were allowed to watch, if it was a new movie, first it'd come out in the movie theater. And we weren't allowed to go there. So you had to be patient. Right? Though once when I was little, my grandma, when we were going to visit her, she snuck us off and took us to E.T. That was the first time I'd ever been to a movie theater. 2 other times when I was in high school, I had my own car and a full-time job. I did go to a movie theater on dates. TVs and movies were something that was greatly discouraged. I actually found my childhood pastor on Facebook recently, and I was shocked to see he had a Facebook because he was very much against, I don't want to say technology, but any kind of entertainment technology. And he appears to be doing very well, and he's still very active as a head pastor down there, which is awesome to see. But things we watched were greatly monitored by my parents. So, once the movie was out of the movie theater, there was a gap in time. It didn't go straight to streaming. There was no streaming. You waited. You had to drive to Blockbuster once it finally came out, walk down the aisles of Blockbuster looking for the case of the movie you wanted, and once you found it, you were usually disappointed because it was empty. Because usually when a movie first came out, people were standing in line to rent them. I know you young folks have no idea what I'm talking about. So if you want a VHS, if you want to know what that is, you're going to have to Google it because I'm not going to stand up here and explain it.
I grew up before Blockbuster.
That's fair, that's fair. I wasn't going to say it. We still were because you couldn't keep a controller in the house. It disappeared. At some point, though, we were given a TV for our bedroom because our grandma bought us a Nintendo. It was in black and white. It was the old ones that really didn't work all that well. We had an Atari, that's right off. My dad and Melissa's mom used to actually fight us for the Atari. They would play Pac-Man and Joust all evening long. It blew my mind. I was like this little. I'm like, Grandma bought that for us. And Dad's like, go do something else. And her mother was right along with him. So you could ask that worker if they had a copy in the return box. If you had a worker that was willing to look, sometimes they would be there. Sometimes you'd get lucky. But if not, you had to wait. And I don't even want to go into TV shows. New episodes were once a week, maybe. During the commercials, you rushed to go to the bathroom, get a drink, because drinks were not allowed in the living room. Took out the trash so you didn't get in trouble because you were watching TV before your chores, because you didn't have a choice on when these things came on. And try to do all this and get back before the commercial was over. Now they can pause and rewind. You can also binge watch every episode of a TV show and every season if you have the time. Clothing. Again, this is contributing, this demonstration of children's impatience. Technology, I believe, has taught them a lot of it. Clothes. You can have clothes delivered today quickly. I could be in here in church on my phone ordering a pair of pants as I'm talking to you. And there's a good possibility they'll beat me to the doorstep. When I was younger, I wore a pant size, which I still do, that is hard to find on the shelves because I got long legs and I'm not skinny. I would have to get a J.C. Penney's catalog. Everybody know what a catalog is? I guess I should ask that. Notice there's not a lot of hands going up over here. Sears as well, but J.C. Penney's had better deals on big and tall than the Sears did. So, I'd have to get the big and tall catalog, flip through it, find out the ones I want, which were usually expensive, and making $4 an hour, minimum wage. It took a while to save up. I'd have patience to save up for the pants I wanted. This was a big deal to me. Clothes were expensive. I grew up on garage sale and Salvation Army. We still do. I love Salvation Army. I appreciate it now more than I did growing up. Because, showing up to school in used clothes, kids aren't exactly kind sometimes. At least in my neighborhood. Yeah, they buy them that way now. Now we're the cool kids. Got holes in your pants? You just paid $120 for it. It's crazy to me. So after ordering these pants that I'd been saving for probably 2 months for, you got to wait another 2 months for them to come in the mail because they didn't get in no hurry. There was no overnight delivery. Even groceries. You have apps you can order groceries on now. One of my adult students at the dojo delivers groceries for a living, and he stays extremely busy. He can pick up hours at any time by just picking his phone up and going to work. People don't have the patience anymore. They don't want to drive to the store, fill the cart, wait in line, drive back. These groceries, you can just order them off your phone. They show up on your doorstep. We have become accustomed to a life of immediate satisfaction. So, that being said, let's get into the scripture. James chapter 5, verse 7 and 8. Therefore, brothers and sisters, be patient until the Lord's coming. See how the farmer waits for the precious fruit of the earth and is patient with it until it receives the early and the late rains. You also must be patient. Strengthen your heart because the Lord's coming is near. So James is not just talking about, well, maybe he is, but the second coming of Jesus Christ. James encourages the suffering Christians to be patient until the coming of the Lord. Reading and praying on this came to a conclusion. We need to be patient until God has intervened in your circumstances. Recently we talked about trials and temptations. Everybody's going to have trials, probably more so than others if you're a believer. Now, Being patient until God intervenes is not sitting on your backside waiting. It's not doing nothing. Well, God's going to send me manna from heaven. No, God wants you to go work. Biblical patience is something different. James gives the examples of two rains. And I had to look that up because I'm from the city, right? They had to plant right before the autumn rain, so they had to wait on the autumn rain, right before it. They had to know it was coming, but they had to have patience. They had to wait on the spring rain before they could harvest. So right before the autumn rain, they'd plant. Right after the spring rain, they'd harvest. But while the farmer waits on the rain, he doesn't just sit on that rocking chair watching the birds fly by. He prepares the soil for planting. He cares for the crops and livestock. He is actually doing everything he can to prepare for the harvest. So, biblical patience. In between the planting and the harvest, we have to spend our time responsibly. We have to be good stewards of the time God has given us. Just like the farmer, we have to do our part to work the soil, to plant the seeds, and to harvest. You know, I had to throw a weightlifting analogy in there. Because it's a lot like lifting weights. You put in the work, you eat the right food, you sleep, you drink plenty of water. You're doing the preparation before you have the results. You have to have patience. And if you ever lifted weights for any significant amount of time, you realize how much patience you have to get stronger. If you lose your job and you're looking for another, there's no sitting on your couch saying, well, God's going to bring it to me, which there's times He may. But there's times you're going to have to get out and do your part. You're going to have to look. You got to apply. You got to perhaps look for further education, right? You may even have to do jobs you don't want to do until God brings you to the one you're supposed to do. And a lot of people have forgotten that. Young people, if you want a spouse, you need to patiently work on yourself. Young adults these days don't want to hear this. You have to make yourself suitable to the spouse you were looking for. Everybody's like, just accept me how I am. I want to be this way. Well, then you're going to get somebody you have to accept how they are, and they're just going to be that way. And that's probably not going to work out. If you don't meet the standards of a spouse you're looking for, you need to start working towards those standards yourself. Work on yourself while you patiently wait. Kids, if you want a good grade on a final test, you have to patiently put in the work. You have to study, listen to lectures, read the assigned materials. What I'm saying is biblical patience is not waiting for God to do the work for you. Biblical patience is not waking up to manna. It's preparing the soil so you can plant the seed right before the rain. Sometimes we will be tempted to cut corners, especially since technology, like I was talking earlier, I said a lot of things in jest, but it's true. Technology has taught us immediate satisfaction. And our culture, our society is becoming a technology society, and everybody's expecting immediate satisfaction. I gave the example of being patient when lifting weights, job hunting, looking for a spouse, and schoolwork. When lifting weights, you can cut corners. You don't have to be patient. There's illegal drugs. There's steroids. There's things that'll make you strong and big without putting a lot of work. If you're looking for a better job or more money, you can steal the money. That's a shortcut, right? I can lie on my resume. to get a better job. I can cut corners. You can marry the first man or woman you think that you fell in love with, even though they don't meet the standard God has given you. And you can even lie to them about who you are. I've seen that quite often. You can cheat on your schoolwork and cheat on the final. You'll get that final grade. None of this is patiently waiting for God's will. When we are not patient for God's interventions, there are consequences. All right, we're going to go back to the beginning. Genesis chapter 15, verses 1 through 6, please. Genesis chapter 15, 1 through 6. Excuse me. After these events, the word of the Lord came to Abram in a vision. Sorry, just a second. I work with ages kindergarten through 12, so I get all the germs going around both buildings. After these events, the word of the Lord came to Abram in a vision. Do not be afraid, Abram. I am your shield. Your reward will be very great. But Abram said, Lord God, what can you give me, since I am childless, and the heir of my house is Eliezer of Damascus? Abram continued, Look, you have given me no offspring, so a slave born in my house will be my heir. Now the word of the Lord came to him. This one will not be your heir. Instead, one who comes from your own body will be your heir. He took him outside and said, Look at the sky and count the stars, if you are able to count them. Then he said to him, Your offspring will be numerous. Abram believed the Lord, and he credited it to him as righteousness. God promised Abraham more offspring than he can count. That his offspring would be as numerous as the stars. In verse 4, God promised Abraham an heir, a male offspring. Some time goes by and we run into a problem. Abraham becomes impatient. Genesis chapter 16, verse 1 and 2. Abram's wife, Sarai, had not borne any children for him, but she owned an Egyptian slave named Hagar. Sarai said to Abram, Since the Lord has prevented me from bearing children, go to my slave. Perhaps through her I can build a family. And Abram agreed to what Sarai said. Sarah offered Hagar her slave, and for your children, yes, Sarai became Sarah later on. She's renamed. In place to bear children. It was common practice. If you could not bear children, or if your husband needed more children for whatever reason, someone, a slave, could bear those children, and you can adopt them. And they would become part of your family. So you can say Abraham and Sarah decided that they would cheat on the test. I'm here to tell you that God does not want you to cheat on the test. When God is giving the final, there are huge consequences when you cheat. Genesis chapter 16, verses 3 through 5, please. So Abram's wife Sarai took Hagar, her Egyptian slave, and gave her to her husband Abram as a wife for him. This happened after Abram had lived in the land of Canaan 10 years. He slept with Hagar, and she became pregnant. When she saw that she was pregnant, her mistress contemptible, to her. Then Sarai said to Abram, "You are responsible for my suffering. I put my slave in your arms." And when she saw that she was pregnant, I became contemptible to her. May the Lord judge between me and you. So Abram and Sarah cheated on the test. Now that she sees Hagar pregnant, she's upset about it. She's jealous. There's probably some conviction. If you're a believer, that's how it's going to be. You cheat, you cut corners, you try to get to where God said you're going without patience. There'll be penalties, there'll be conviction. The Holy Spirit will convict you of your impatience. Genesis 16, verse 6. Abram replied to Sarai, "Here your slave is in your power. Do whatever you want with her." Then Sarai mistreated her so much she ran from her. Abraham gives up his new wife. He relinquished her back to Sarah as a slave, and she mistreats her. So Hagar runs away. Can you really blame her? She was being used to cheat on the test, and she was successful at it. For being successful, she is being punished. She did what they wanted her to do, and now they're punishing her for it. Genesis chapter 16, verses 7 through 16. The angel of the Lord found her by a spring in the wilderness, the spring on the way to Shur. He said, "Hagar, slave of Sarai, where have you come from and where are you going?" She replied, "I'm running away from my mistress Sarai." The angel of the Lord said to her, "Go back to your mistress and submit to her authority." The angel of the Lord said to her, "I will greatly multiply your offspring, and they will be too many to count." The angel of the Lord said to her, "You have conceived and will have a son. You will name him Ishmael, for the Lord has heard your cry of affliction. This man will be like a wild donkey. His hand will be against everyone, and everyone's hand will be against him. He will settle near all his relatives." So she named the Lord who spoke to her, "You are El Roi." For she said, "In this place have I actually seen the one who sees me." That is why the well is called Bir Lahai Roi. It is between Kadesh and Beran. So Hagar gave birth to Abram's son, and Abram named his son, whom Hagar bore, Ishmael. Abram was 86 years old when Hagar bore Ishmael to him. The angel of the Lord, otherwise known as Jesus in angel form or God in angel form, came to Hagar and instructed her to return and to submit. Her reward for doing so was the knowledge that her son Ishmael would have offsprings in accordance with Abraham's covenant with God. Because don't forget, it may not be her blood, his wife Sarah's blood, but it's still Abraham's, and there's still a covenant. This would be amazing for Hagar and Ishmael, but don't forget, this was impatience that brought this child. Let's see what their lack of patience brought. Biblical and historical accounts show that Ishmael had 12 sons. These 12 sons became 12 tribes. Kind of parallels something, doesn't it? They settled in the lands between Beersheba and Egypt. Isaiah chapter 60 verse 7 mentions two of his sons' descendants as those who raised flocks. The descendants of Ishmael became known as Arabs. Arabs basically means nomads. So they were tending flocks. Genesis chapter 25, verse 18. 25:18, please. And they settled from Havilah to Shur, which is opposite Egypt as you go towards the shore. He stayed near all of his relatives. And reading that, I recalled that I'd read that differently somewhere else. Turns out, depends on which translation you have. It says, like mine, that they lived near relatives. Some translations say, however, not only did they live near relatives, they lived in hostility towards relatives. Which I believe I originally read that in NIV years ago, the first time. But I looked it up because I have several translations sitting right there. And yes, some of mine said they lived in hostility, and some of mine just said they lived near them. But we already established earlier that there will be hostility. The Ishmaelites became known as a warlike, aggressive people, a warrior nation from time to time, which shouldn't have been a big surprise to anyone. They are descendants of Abraham, thus related to the Israelites, who for a while became a warrior nation. Ishmaelites are mentioned in several places in the Bible. Some examples: Genesis chapter 37, verse 28, Joseph was sold to Ishmaelites. Judges chapter 8, verse 24, mentions that the Ishmaelites wore gold earrings. And there was many others, but for the sake of time, I'll move on. They stuck around, mingled with tribes, and grew into a great nation. They became ancestors to Muslim Arabs. Most Arab Muslims claim to be direct descendants to Ishmael. It's one of the things they tend to brag about. How much of them are, I don't know. But here's what we do know. The Ishmaelites became part of many nations in the area. So the blood spread through the area. And these nations that they became part of they became Arabs. 93% of them are Muslim, according to Google. 93%. Knowing this and knowing what is in the Bible, we know that Ishmaelites and their descendants have been attacking Israelites since they have existed as a people. That is, since the Ishmaelites have existed as a people. And they're still doing it today. Just turn the news on. I don't even watch news. It gets too negative. But you can check news in the Middle East. Google if you want. It'll show you there's still lots of conflicts between the Jews and the Muslims. Between Israel and the Muslims. So Abraham and Sarah's impatience caused more bloodshed than can be measured. If they would have patiently waited for God to fulfill his promise on his time, can you imagine how many lives could have been saved? Because this battle has been going on and will continue to go on until the end of times. So we see what could happen when we're impatient. Now, we're all not Abraham. We may not all cause another nation to exist. Well, we might. It's not up to me to decide. So I want to see what happens when we patiently do our diligence until God leads us to the promise he made. 1 Samuel chapter 16. 1 Samuel 16. Now, this is going to go over verses 1 through 12. For the sake of time, I'm going to paraphrase things a little bit. Samuel, the prophet of God, is instructed by God to anoint a new king, for Saul has lost his way. He tells Samuel to go to the house of Jesse. When he views Jesse's sons, God did not lead him to anoint any of these sons. So he asked Jesse, do you have any other sons? And he said, yes, the youngest son is tending to the sheep. So they go and retrieve the youngest son. I'm going to go read verse 13 right quick. So Samuel took the horn of oil and anointed him in the presence of his brothers, and the Spirit of the Lord came powerfully on David from that day forward. Then Samuel set out and went to Ramah. They estimated that David was somewhere around 15 or 16, possibly younger, when he was anointed king. But David did not become king at this point. If we continue on, chapter 16 of 1 Samuel, the Spirit of the Lord left King Saul. King Saul was no longer under God's influence, at least his positive influence. And a harmful spirit was sent from the Lord to torment him. David was taken by King Saul to play the lyre when that harmful spirit was upon him. It soothed King Saul. Growing up, I always find that odd. I'm like, isn't David the anointed king and Saul's getting kicked out? What is going on? David had to have patience. David, what I want you to understand is David did what he was supposed to do while waiting on God to deliver the kingdom to him. Like the farmer, he was patiently waiting, putting in work. David was learning how to be king, right? He was hanging out with a king. He was helping a king. He continues. He was fulfilling the role of a musician, but he was in the presence of a king. And even though he was the anointed king, he still did what he was supposed to do. Took his responsibility very serious as a musician for the king. If we look at 1 Samuel chapter 17, we see in chapter 17, everybody should be familiar with this story. David kills Goliath. So we have David anointed at 15 or 16 years old. And at this point, we know he's not quite 20. And how do we know that? Because he's not in the army. You had to be 20 to serve in the army at the time. He was going back and forth from tending sheep and playing the lyre for the king. So we have probably some years that have passed, but not very many yet. But when David goes out to bring his brother's supplies, he hears Goliath's blasphemy of God. Bravely and under the influence of God, he kills Goliath, knowing God was going to be by his side. He is still patiently waiting, though, for his promise to be anointed king. But he's establishing himself as a man of God and a warrior. 1 Samuel chapter 18, we find David becoming the best friends with Jonathan. And I've talked to you about him before. So at that point, King Saul takes David into his service full time. He's no longer a shepherd. David, the anointed king of Israel, anointed by Samuel on the behalf of God, is now working full time for King Saul when human nature says he should just go ahead and overthrow him. Get rid of him. You've killed the giant. Why can't you just kill the king? Take what is promised to you. But David is patient. And if you didn't know, our human nature tends to be wrong, especially when not influenced by God. David is patiently doing his part. He's working and learning. King Saul makes him a commander of the army. David had the loyalty of his men. He could have overthrown King Saul. He could have taken the kingdom. The people even talked about how many more thousands of people David was killing in battle compared to Saul. But David continued to be patient. We do not have enough time to talk about all the things David endured while waiting, while being patient to actually be the king. He could have cheated multiple times to reach what was rightfully his, but God didn't want him to. It wasn't time. David had to be patient. Let's go ahead and turn to 2 Samuel chapter 2, please. I promise I'll be done shortly. 2 Samuel chapter 2, verse 1. Sometime later, David inquired of the Lord. Let's say that again. David inquired of the Lord, should I go to one of the towns of Judah? And the Lord answered him, go. Then David asked, where should I go? To Hebron, the Lord replied. While David was being patient, he spoke to God. He did not just go out and do things on his own, find his own plan how to reach the end. He said, okay, God, where do I go next? What is next on the agenda? What do I need to learn? What do I need to do? 2 Samuel chapter 5, verse 4. David was 30 years old when he was anointed king of Judah. Let's go ahead and read that one real quick. David was 30 years old when he began his reign. He reigned 40 years. God's will for his life was not done. He was just the king of Judah at this point. David still had to be patient. David had soil to prepare, seeds to plant, crops to care for. David had to fight the house of Saul for the throne of Israel. In verse 5, in Hebron he reigned over Judah 7 years and 6 months. And in Jerusalem he reigned 33 years over all of Israel and Judah. It wasn't until David was 37 years old when he became the king of Israel. Over 20 years had passed since he was anointed king. God's promise took 20 years of patience with plenty of opportunity to cheat, to make the end right here, to make it now, to do it today. But he was patient and he put in the work because he was waiting on God to show up and say, this is the time. You may be saying, Brother Mike, we have been speaking about patience, but the title is Prosperity and Patience in Prayer. I want you to look at the events again. Abraham did not consult with God about their plan to make a son. When he did speak to God, God told him what he needed to do, told him what the promise made would be fulfilled. Abraham did not have patience. This caused him and his ancestors to this day endless problems. His lack of patience and communication with God at that point, which makes no sense because it's Abraham and he knows better. But human nature sometimes takes over. None of us is perfect. He did not communicate with God. He made a decision with his wife that affected the entire world for history and presence, probably for till the end of time. David, however, consulted with God constantly throughout his time of patience. I would imagine the wait felt endless, and the temptation to cheat his way to the end was constantly staring him in the face. Constantly. What do you have to do? Well, you had to kill Saul. That would have been simple. He could have killed Saul when he was playing the harp for him, or the lyre, or whatever they want to call it. I always picture a harp. I don't even know what a lyre looks like. I ought to look it up. I've been told it looks like a harp. He could have easily killed him there, right? And especially, he could have made all sorts of, he killed himself, guys. No one would blame that Saul's acting crazy. They know he's acting crazy. That's why they hired someone to play music for him, because the music calmed him down. And there were so many times in David's life between 15 or 16 to 37, he could have taken the throne. but instead he consulted with God. David, as a result of his patience, ruled Israel until his death at 70 years of age. Usually back then, when a king ruled until his death, it's because somebody killed him. It wasn't because he got old and died of natural causes. So David lived a successful and peaceful life, not always peaceful, but successful, overall prosperous life for 40 years as the king of Israel or Judah. David's patience was rewarded. In closing, I want all of you to know God has a plan for you. No matter what you are going through, you can make it. You can succeed. You will reach God's will for your life, but you need to pray. You need to speak to God. You need to seek His wisdom and counsel. God's promise for you is there. You simply have to be patient. If you would, bow your heads for me, please.